The first time Colonel Daniel Carter saw my ex-husband in uniform, he did not raise his voice. He stepped between us in the parking lot of a veterans fundraiser, looked Mark Ralston straight in the eye and said, "Staff Sergeant, you need to take one step back." For 3 years I had been waiting for that moment without knowing it. 3 years of changing grocery stores, 3 years of eating dinner alone, 3 years of sleeping with my phone face down because every unknown number made my hands shake. My ex-husband's jaw tightened. He was used to frightening people. He was used to men backing away when he leaned close and lowered his voice. But the colonel did not move. And for the first time since my divorce, I watched the man who had made my life a nightmare run out of words. But that was not where my story began. It began years earlier at a 4th of July cookout behind my parents' small brick house in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I was 26 then, a young Army logistics officer who still believed hard work could keep life simple. Back then, Mark wore his uniform like a second skin. People noticed him when he walked into a room. He was tall, clean-cut, and always careful to say ma'am and sir in that steady Southern voice that made people trust him. My father liked him immediately. "He's solid," Dad told me, "a man who understands service." I wanted to believe that. Mark was attentive in the beginning. He brought coffee to my office when I stayed late. He stood beside me at church like he had been raised by saints. When he proposed after 18 months, everyone said I was lucky. 2 soldiers building a life together, my aunt said. That's something special. For a while I thought so too. We rented a modest house not far from base. I bought blue curtains for the kitchen. They expect the nightmare to announce itself right away. It rarely does. At first, Mark's control came dressed as concern. "You don't need to stay late with Captain Reynolds," he said one evening. "Men get the wrong idea." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. A week later, he asked why I had changed my phone password. "I didn't change it," I said. "It's the same one." "Then say it." I remember standing in our kitchen with a dish towel in my hand, feeling foolish for being afraid. He was my husband. Husbands and wives shared things. That was what he told me. So, I gave him the password. After that, he checked my phone whenever he wanted. If a male coworker texted about a shift change, Mark asked why he had my number. If I smiled at a cashier, Mark went silent in the truck. If I wore lipstick, he asked who I was trying to impress. The first time he called me dramatic, I apologized. The second time, I tried to explain. By the 10th time, I stopped defending myself. In public, he was still the man everyone admired. At battalion events, he smiled, told funny stories, and made everyone laugh. If I seemed quiet, he squeezed my shoulder just hard enough for only me to understand. "Long week," he'd say for me. "She's tired." And everyone believed him. That was the loneliest part, watching other people admire the man who frightened me. The first time he hit me, we were arguing about a promotion board I had been selected for. He said I had not told him quickly enough. I said I had only found out that afternoon. He stepped close. "You like making me look stupid," he said. "I'm not trying to make you look like anything." His hand came across my face so fast I did not understand what had happened until I tasted blood where my tooth had cut my lip. Then came the apology. Flowers on the table, tears in his eyes, his hands shaking as he said deployment stress had gotten to him, that he hated himself, that I was the only person who could help him stay grounded. I believed him because leaving felt impossible, and forgiving him felt like a door I could still open. But the door only led deeper inside. By our 5th year of marriage, I had become an expert at reading his mood from the sound of his truck. I knew how to laugh at dinner parties and cry in the shower where the water covered the sound. Then, one winter morning, I looked in the bathroom mirror and did not recognize the woman brushing her teeth. I was an officer. I could brief senior leaders without trembling. But in my own home, I asked permission to visit my sister. That was the moment something in me changed. I started documenting everything. Photos of bruises, screenshots of messages, dates written in a small notebook hidden inside an old boot box. I opened a separate bank account. I spoke quietly with a legal assistance attorney on base, then with a civilian divorce lawyer. When I finally filed, Mark did not explode the way I expected. He smiled. That scared me more. At the courthouse, he wore his dress uniform, polished and perfect. He shook hands with the bailiff. He looked like the kind of man America wanted to believe in. When the hearing ended, I stepped outside into the Carolina sunlight and let myself breathe for the first time in years. Mark followed me to the sidewalk. "You think this means you're free?" he said. I kept walking. Then he said the words that would follow me for the next 3 years. Any man who comes into your life, I'll ruin him. And when he walks away, you'll remember who you belong to. I stopped beside my car keys, shaking in my hand. I wanted to tell him I belonged to nobody. But my mouth would not open. So I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove away. That night alone in my apartment, my phone lit up with an unknown number. The message had only 5 words. You'll never be free, Emily. And I understood then that the marriage was over. But the nightmare had followed me home. I deleted the message without replying. That became my routine. Delete. Block. Change my route to work. Tell myself I was imagining things. Then start all over again. People often ask why women don't simply move on after leaving an abusive marriage. The truth is, many of us desperately want to. We just don't know how when fear keeps finding our address. The first 6 months after the divorce were strangely quiet. Too quiet. I moved into a small townhouse outside Fayetteville with a fenced backyard and a creaky front porch. It wasn't much, but every room belonged to me. For the first time in years, I could leave a coffee mug on the kitchen counter without someone criticizing me. I could watch whatever I wanted on television. I could sleep diagonally across the bed. Freedom arrived in tiny pieces, but fear arrived with it. Every unfamiliar pickup truck made my stomach tighten. Every knock on the door after sunset made me freeze. The Army transferred me to a different logistics battalion shortly after the divorce. Officially, it had nothing to do with my personal life. Unofficially, a few people knew I needed distance. I threw myself into work. Supply chains, equipment readiness reports, late-night inventory checks. If I stayed busy enough, maybe my mind wouldn't have room for Mark. For a while, it worked. Then one Friday afternoon, my friend Lisa stopped by my office carrying 2 coffees. Lisa had been my closest friend since Officer Basic course. She sat across from my desk and smiled. "You know my neighbor." "The high school history teacher." She nodded. "He's been asking about you." I laughed nervously. "Why?" "Because he thinks you're beautiful." I stared into my coffee. "I appreciate that." "You should let me introduce you." "No, you didn't even think about it." "I don't need to." Lisa sighed. "Emily, I'm fine." "No, you're surviving." There was a difference. I knew it. She knew it. Neither of us argued. A month later, she convinced me to attend a neighborhood barbecue. "Just come eat," she said. "No dating. No pressure." I almost didn't go. When I finally arrived, I spent most of the afternoon talking with retired couples about gardening, grandchildren, and college football. It felt normal. Then someone introduced me to the history teacher. His name was Michael. He looked to be in his early 40s. Soft-spoken. Kind eyes. Nothing about him felt threatening. We talked about history, Army life, and his students. He made me laugh. Not because he was trying to impress me. Because he genuinely enjoyed listening. For the first time since my divorce, I caught myself thinking, maybe, just maybe. That night my phone rang. Unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again. Then a text appeared. "Stay away from the teacher." My blood turned cold. I had never told anyone Mark's threats. Lisa certainly hadn't. Michael didn't even know my last name until that afternoon. I deleted the message. I barely slept. The following Tuesday, Lisa called. "You'll never believe this." "What happened?" "Michael canceled dinner." "Dinner?" "He was going to ask you out." My chest tightened. He said something came up. 2 weeks later, I learned the truth. Michael stopped by my office unexpectedly. "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything." He hesitated. "I got a visit." I already knew. "From my ex." He nodded. He knew where I taught. My hands began shaking. "He didn't threaten me exactly." "What did he say?" Michael looked embarrassed. "He told me you've been emotionally unstable since the divorce." I closed my eyes. "He said you've accused several men of harassment." My throat burned. He seemed convincing. "I understand." "No," he said quietly, "you don't." He looked genuinely ashamed. "I should have talked to you first." "You were trying to protect yourself." "I'm sorry." "So am I." He left. I never saw him again. That became the pattern. Every few months someone would appear. A man from church. A physical therapist. A widower my mother hoped I'd meet. None of them lasted long. Some simply disappeared. Others admitted Mark had contacted them. One confessed Mark had shown him carefully selected court documents to make it look as though I had been unstable throughout the marriage. Another received anonymous emails warning him that dating me would destroy his career. None of the harassment crossed a legal line clearly enough. Every incident lived in the gray area. Enough to frighten people. Never enough for an arrest. I started blaming myself. Maybe I wasn't worth the trouble. Maybe any decent man would decide I came with too much baggage. Eventually, I stopped accepting invitations. When coworkers suggested dinner after work, I made excuses. When church friends tried introducing me to widowers or divorced veterans, I smiled politely and changed the subject. Life became wonderfully predictable. Wake up, go to work, come home, read, sleep, repeat. Years passed. On paper, I was thriving. I earned another promotion, led larger logistics operations, mentored younger officers. Command trusted me with increasingly complicated assignments. One afternoon, my commanding officer called me into his office. Major Henderson. Sir, I have an opportunity. I waited. A 6-month joint readiness planning assignment. Where? The Pentagon. I blinked. Me. You've earned it. I accepted before fear could answer for me. Washington, D.C. felt like another world. The work was demanding. Every branch of the military seemed to be represented. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Long meetings, longer days. No one cared about my divorce. No one knew Mark. For the first time in years, I could simply be Emily. 3 weeks into the assignment, I arrived early for a planning meeting carrying 2 thick binders. As I reached for the conference room door, someone behind me said, "Need a hand, Major?" I turned. The man wore an army uniform with silver eagles on each shoulder. Colonel Daniel Carter. Tall, calm, gray beginning to touch the sides of his dark hair. Probably in his early 50s. Old enough to have earned every line around his eyes. Young enough to carry himself like he still led soldiers in the field. Before I could answer, he took one binder with an easy smile. No officer should lose a battle with office supplies. I laughed. It surprised both of us, because it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from myself. In almost 3 years, Colonel Daniel Carter never flirted with me. That was the first thing I noticed. He never found excuses to stand too close. Never commented on my appearance. Never treated me differently because I was one of the few women in the room. He simply treated me like an officer. Oddly enough, after everything I had been through, that felt extraordinary. Over the next several weeks, our paths crossed almost every day. The Pentagon had a way of making the same people run into one another. Meetings blurred into briefings, briefings into working lunches, and working lunches into late evenings, spent reviewing logistics plans for joint training exercises. Daniel was methodical. If he promised to review a document by Thursday, it was finished Wednesday afternoon. If a young lieutenant made a mistake, he corrected the mistake without humiliating the officer. I watched people relax when he entered a room. Respect followed him naturally. Fear never did. One rainy Tuesday, we found ourselves leaving the building at the same time. "You parked in South Lot?" he asked. I did. So did I. The rain had become a downpour before we reached the doors. Daniel pulled an umbrella from his briefcase. "I've got enough room for 2. I hesitated. 3 years of instinct screamed that accepting even small kindnesses came with consequences. He noticed my hesitation but didn't press. "If you'd rather wait it out," he said, "that's perfectly fine." Something about giving me a choice instead of expecting an answer made all the difference. "I'll take the umbrella." We walked across the parking lot talking about completely ordinary things. His daughter had just started graduate school. His son was serving in the Coast Guard. My mother had recently taken up gardening and somehow managed to grow tomatoes the size of softballs. When we reached my car, he smiled. "Have a good evening, Major." "You too, sir." That was it. No hidden agenda. No lingering stare. No pressure. I sat behind the steering wheel for several minutes before driving home. I had forgotten how peaceful a simple conversation could feel. Over the next 2 months, our friendship grew naturally. Sometimes we grabbed coffee between meetings. Sometimes we argued about football. He rooted for Army. I stubbornly defended my hometown Carolina Panthers despite years of disappointment. One afternoon he asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" My shoulders immediately tensed. "You don't have to answer." "What is it? Were you always this careful?" I looked down at my coffee. "What do you mean?" "You apologize before expressing an opinion." I hadn't realized I did that. "You also watch every doorway before you enter a restaurant." I forced a smile. "Occupational habit." He studied me for a moment. "No." The word wasn't harsh. It was gentle. "That's not tactical awareness. It's fear." I couldn't answer. Instead, I changed the subject. He let me. That too mattered. By October, our 6-month assignment was nearly over. One Friday afternoon, Daniel stopped by my office carrying 2 paper cups. "I owe you coffee." "You don't owe me anything." "I lost our football bet." I laughed. "You did." He handed me the cup. Emily. It was the first time he had used my first name. We've spent months working together. Yes. I enjoy your company. My heart started racing. I was wondering. He paused long enough to let me breathe. If you'd like to have dinner sometime after work. Not as colleagues. Not as officers. Just dinner. Everything inside me froze. Daniel must have seen it. He immediately nodded. You don't have to answer now. No. His expression changed slightly. Then I realized what I had said. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. He waited. No interruption. No frustration. My answer isn't about you. I figured. My ex. I stopped. The words caught in my throat. Daniel quietly moved his chair closer. Not too close. Just enough to let me know I wasn't alone. You don't owe me an explanation. I think I do. So I told him. Not everything. Not yet. Just enough. The marriage. The control. The divorce. The threats. The men who disappeared. The years I spent convincing myself I was safer alone. When I finished, neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, he asked, Have you documented everything? I blinked. Everything. The messages. Most of them. The dates. Yes. The witnesses. Some. He nodded slowly. Good. That wasn't the response I expected. You don't think I'm overreacting? No. You don't think I should just move on? No. You don't think I somehow caused this? He looked genuinely puzzled. Emily. His voice became almost fatherly. No decent man hears what you just told me and blames the victim. I felt something crack inside me. Not painfully. Relief. For years I had waited for someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. One sentence had finally done it. A week later I said yes, not to a relationship. Just dinner. A quiet Italian restaurant in Alexandria. No uniforms, no expectations. Daniel arrived wearing jeans and a navy sweater. He looked almost unfamiliar without rank on his shoulders. During dinner we talked about everything except my ex. Books. Travel. Retirement plans. His late wife who had died from cancer 6 years earlier. My father who still insisted on mowing his own lawn at 73. When the check arrived I realized I had smiled almost the entire evening. Driving home I caught myself humming with the radio. Then I saw it. A black pickup truck. 3 cars behind me. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe. I took an extra turn. The truck followed. Another turn. Still there. My pulse quickened. I drove toward a busy shopping center instead of home. The truck continued straight. I sat in the parking lot for nearly 20 minutes trying to convince myself I was imagining things. The next morning my phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. I heard you had dinner. My hands went numb. Another message arrived seconds later. Tell the colonel to stay away from what's mine. I stared at the screen. I had never told Mark Daniels' name. I had never mentioned his rank. I had never posted photographs, which meant only one thing. Someone had been watching. The message stayed on my screen until it went dark. I didn't answer. For years that had been my survival strategy. Don't respond. Don't provoke him. Don't give him the satisfaction of knowing he had reached me. But something had changed. Not because I was suddenly fearless. Because I was tired. Tired of measuring every decision against Mark's temper. Tired of wondering who he might be watching. Tired of believing my future belonged to the man I'd divorced. I took screenshots of both messages and forwarded them to a secure folder I had kept for years. Every text. Every unknown call. Every suspicious incident. Every date. Every location. The file had grown thick enough to tell its own story. I had just never believed anyone would listen. That Monday morning, Daniel knocked softly on my office door. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't. He didn't ask why. He waited. I handed him my phone. He read both messages without saying a word. When he finished, he set the phone carefully on my desk. Has he contacted you this directly before, not mentioning someone by rank? And you're certain he doesn't know me personally? I'm certain. He leaned back in his chair. This isn't about me. No. It's about control. Yes. He folded his hands. What are you afraid will happen next? I honestly don't know. Good. I frowned. Good. You stopped pretending you can predict him. I must have looked confused because he smiled gently. People like your ex want you exhausted. They want you guessing. They want fear to do the work for them. He paused. So let's stop guessing. That sentence stayed with me. For years I had reacted. Daniel was asking me to prepare instead. Not for revenge. For reality. That afternoon, he introduced me to a civilian attorney who specialized in protective orders involving military personnel. Not because Daniel pulled strings, because he knew exactly who had the right expertise. The attorney spent nearly 2 hours reviewing my documentation. She looked up finally. "You've done something most victims don't." "I have." "You kept records. I wasn't even sure why." "You've created a timeline." She tapped the folder. "This matters." For the first time since my divorce, someone treated my evidence like evidence instead of heartbreak. The next recommendation surprised me even more. "Report everything through your chain of command," the attorney said. I hesitated. What if people think I'm trying to hurt his career? She looked directly at me. "Emily, this isn't about revenge. This is about accountability." Those words hit harder than I expected. I had spent 3 years avoiding any action because I didn't want anyone to think I was vindictive. Somehow I had confused silence with dignity. Filing the report wasn't easy. My commanding officer listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked only one question. "Do you have documentation?" "Yes, sir." I placed the folder on his desk. He opened it slowly. The room stayed quiet for several minutes. Finally, he looked at me. "You've been carrying this alone." "Yes, sir." "You shouldn't have had to." I nearly cried. Not because someone pitied me, because someone believed me. Word travels carefully in the military, especially when it involves another service member. Within days, I learned the report had been forwarded to the appropriate investigative office. No one promised a particular outcome. No one guaranteed punishment. They simply said the allegations would be reviewed. That was enough. Truth deserved its chance. 3 days later, Mark called. Not from an unknown number. From his own. I let it go to voicemail. His voice sounded calm, almost cheerful. "Emily, I heard you've been talking. I wouldn't do that if I were you. You know how rumors can spread." The message ended there. No direct threat. Just enough. Exactly as always. I saved it. Daniel never asked to hear the voicemail. Instead, he asked, "How are you holding up?" I laughed quietly. "I don't know." "I believe you do." I thought about it. My stomach still knots every time my phone rings. That's honest. But he waited. "I'm not hiding anymore." A small smile crossed his face. "That's progress." Several weeks passed. Investigators contacted me twice. They were respectful, methodical. They asked for dates, names, copies of messages, photographs, and witness information. Nothing dramatic happened. No one burst through doors. No television cameras appeared. Real investigations move slowly. I appreciated that. Truth deserves patience. One afternoon, Lisa called. "I've been meaning to tell you something." "What is it?" "Remember Michael, the history teacher?" He reached out. I smiled faintly. "Is he okay?" "He said he wishes he'd trusted his instincts instead of your ex." I didn't know what to say. He also said, she hesitated, "He wasn't the only one." "What do you mean?" "Apparently Mark approached another man from church. Then another. Then someone from your running club." I closed my eyes. "So it wasn't just me imagining things." "No, it never was." A month later, one of the investigators called again. "Major Henderson." "Yes. We've interviewed several individuals." I held my breath. "There appears to be a consistent pattern." "What kind of pattern?" "Repeated unwanted contact with men associated with you." My knees felt weak. For years I had questioned my own memory. Now strangers were describing it without ever hearing my emotions. Just facts. That evening, Daniel and I walked along the Potomac River after work. The autumn air had turned crisp. Leaves drifted across the sidewalk. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally I said, "I kept waiting for someone to rescue me." He looked at the water. "And now, I don't think that's what this is anymore." "What is it?" I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "I think I'm rescuing myself." Daniel nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that." He reached for my hand. Not quickly, not assuming. He simply turned his palm upward between us, giving me the choice. I looked at his hand. Then I placed mine in it, not because I needed protection, because for the first time in years, I was choosing my future instead of running from my past. The official findings came in January on a morning so cold the windows of my townhouse were edged with frost. I was making coffee when my phone rang. This time I did not flinch. That alone felt like a miracle. My commanding officer's name appeared on the screen. I answered with the calm voice I used at work, though my fingers tightened around the mug. "Major Henderson." "Good morning, sir." I wanted you to hear this directly. The investigation substantiated a pattern of harassment and intimidation. For a moment I heard nothing but the hum of my refrigerator. Substantiated. Such a plain word. So formal. So quiet. Yet it carried the weight of every night I had sat alone wondering whether anyone would ever believe me. My commander continued. Appropriate disciplinary action is being taken through his command. I can't discuss every detail, but I can tell you this has been taken seriously. I closed my eyes. Thank you, sir. You should also know several people came forward. My throat tightened. People who had seen things, yes, and people who regretted staying silent. After the call ended, I stood in my kitchen and let the coffee grow cold. I had imagined that moment many times. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would cry. I thought I might want to call Mark and say, now everyone knows. But what I felt was quieter than victory. Relief. Not the kind that makes you celebrate. The kind that lets your shoulders finally drop. Mark was not court-martialed. This story is not that kind of story. No dramatic arrest. No handcuffs in a crowded room. No sudden collapse in front of everyone who once admired him. Real life is rarely so theatrical. But he lost what mattered most to him. Control. His command no longer saw only the decorated soldier. They saw the man behind the uniform. He received formal consequences, mandatory counseling restrictions on contact, and the quiet but unmistakable loss of trust from people whose respect he had once taken for granted. For a man like Mark, that was punishment he could not charm his way around. The first time I saw him after the findings, it was at a required legal proceeding related to the protective order. He sat across the room in civilian clothes. No polished boots. No carefully pressed uniform. No medals. Just a man with tired eyes and folded hands. For years I had believed seeing him again would break me. It didn't. My heart beat faster, yes. My palms felt damp. But I stayed seated. Daniel sat 2 rows behind me, not as my savior, not as my shield, but as someone who had promised I would not have to walk through that hallway alone. When the judge reviewed the order, Mark did not interrupt. He did not smirk. He did not try to intimidate anyone. When it was over, he stood carefully and asked through the attorneys if he could say one sentence. I had the right to refuse. Part of me wanted to. Another part of me knew I no longer needed silence to protect myself. So I nodded. Mark turned toward me. His voice was lower than I remembered. I blamed you for everything I hated about myself, he said. You didn't deserve any of it. That was all. No begging. No excuses. No request for forgiveness. Just one sentence that should have come years earlier. I did not answer. Not because I was cruel. Because some apologies are not conversations. They are receipts. Proof that the truth finally found its way into the room. Healing did not happen all at once. It came in ordinary moments. The first time I drove home without checking my rearview mirror 10 times. The first time an unknown number called and I let it ring without shaking. The first time Daniel kissed my forehead and I did not wonder what kindness would cost me later. Spring arrived slowly in Virginia. Cherry blossoms opened along the sidewalks near the river. One Saturday, Daniel and I visited my parents in North Carolina. My father grilled hamburgers in the backyard wearing the same old Vietnam veteran cap he refused to replace. My mother pulled me aside while Daniel helped Dad carry chairs. Are you happy? She asked. I looked across the yard. Daniel was laughing at something my father said. Not performing. Not trying to impress anyone. Just present. I think I'm learning how to be, I said. Mother took my hand. That's enough for now. 6 months later, I attended a military family ceremony at Fort Liberty. I wore my dress uniform. Daniel wore his. People greeted us warmly, but I no longer needed their approval to know who I was. At one point, I saw a young woman standing near the refreshment table, twisting her wedding ring and watching her husband from across the room. He was smiling at a group of officers. She was not smiling. I recognized the look on her face, not the details, not the story, just the look. The quiet calculation of someone measuring every word before speaking. I walked over and introduced myself. Major Emily Henderson. She gave a polite smile. Nice to meet you, ma'am. I did not ask personal questions. I did not embarrass her. I simply said, if you ever need someone to talk to professionally or personally, my door is open. Her eyes met mine for 1 second too long. Then she nodded. Thank you, ma'am. That was when I understood what my revenge really was. It was not watching Mark lose. It was becoming someone fear could not erase. It was telling the truth without shame. It was leaving the door open for the next woman who might still be searching for hers. Daniel and I did not rush into marriage. At our age and after the lives we had lived, we understood that love did not need speed to prove itself. We built slowly. Sunday breakfast, evening walks, phone calls that brought comfort instead of dread. When he finally asked if I wanted to spend the rest of my life beside him, he did it on my back porch while my mother's tomato plants leaned against the fence. No audience, no grand speech, just a simple question, and a choice that belonged entirely to me. I said yes, not because he rescued me, because I had already rescued myself, and he respected the woman who walked out of the fire on her own 2 feet. Looking back now, I know this much. A uniform can command attention. Rank can demand obedience. Medals can impress a room. But none of those things make a person honorable. Honor is how you treat someone when no one is watching. Strength is not control. Love is not fear. And healing is not forgetting what happened. It is remembering without letting the past decide who gets to hold your hand tomorrow. So if this story reminded you of someone you know, maybe reach out gently. Not with judgment, not with pressure, just with kindness. And if you have ever had to rebuild yourself after someone tried to make you small, I hope you know this: your life is still yours. Your peace is still possible. And the day you stop living by someone else's threats may be the first day you truly come home to yourself. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs courage today. And if you believe quiet strength can change a life, stay with us for more stories like this.